Why the bravest person in the room is always the most vulnerable. Hello, Mind Explorers. Welcome back. Today, we're embarking on a journey that could change everything, a descent through 5 increasingly profound levels of understanding. We're going to unpack one of the most misunderstood yet incredibly powerful words in our emotional dictionary, vulnerability, and specifically the immense courage it takes to be vulnerable first. And no, we won't be staying on the surface. We're diving deep because understanding this isn't just another self-help hack. It's cracking the source code of our relationships, our success, and even our happiness. I promise you this, by the end of this journey, the way you view strength, fear, and connection with others will never be the same. Ever? Level 1, the surface of the known. For most, vulnerability is that uncomfortable feeling of exposing ourselves, of showing our weaknesses. It is, in simple terms, uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It's asking for help without knowing if we'll receive it. It's saying, I love you first. Another aspect we all recognize is its connection to shame. That paralyzing fear that if people see who we truly are, they won't like us. And this dictates our daily behavior. We avoid that difficult conversation. We don't ask for that raise. We don't tell that friend how much they mean to us, all because of the fear of exposure. The most universal example? The fear of public speaking. What is it but the panic of being judged, of having our imperfections seen in real time? And a third basic fact, we associate vulnerability with weakness. We think that being strong means being impenetrable, a fortress without cracks. This idea has ancient roots, stemming from our evolutionary history. For thousands of years, showing weakness in the tribe could literally mean being abandoned or attacked. Imagine our ancestors on the savannah. An individual showing pain or fear was a burden to the group, a magnet for predators. The brain learned a simple lesson: hide, protect, don't show. So what we see today, that discomfort, that association with shame and weakness, is just the tip of the iceberg, an echo of an ancient survival instinct. But if this is what we see on the surface, what secret mechanisms are driving it from beneath? Level 2, the hidden mechanisms? Here comes the first big revelation. Vulnerability isn't the result of human connection. It's the cause. Think about it. Trust doesn't just appear out of nowhere and then we decide to be vulnerable. No. Someone has to take the leap first, be vulnerable first, for trust to be born. Knowing this gives you an incredible tool. When you want to build a stronger relationship, whether with a friend, your partner, or a colleague, the shortcut is to take a small, vulnerable step. Share an insecurity or admit you don't know something. A concrete example, a team leader who admits to their team, I'm not sure how to solve this, I need your ideas. That act of vulnerability doesn't make them look weak. Instead, it invites collaboration and generates tremendous loyalty. On the flip side, this knowledge allows you to spot red flags, warning signs. A person incapable of showing the slightest vulnerability, who is always right and projects absolute perfection, is often building a wall. Think about that person you know who never admits a mistake. Their inability to be vulnerable is a sign that genuine trust is very unlikely to be built with them. It's a shield that prevents any real connection. And all of this is governed by an invisible rule of our biology, a rule written into our brains by a very special hormone. That hormone is oxytocin, often called the cuddle hormone or the trust molecule. When someone is vulnerable with us, our brain can release oxytocin, making us feel more connected and prone to reciprocate with our own vulnerability. It's why when a friend confides a deep problem in you, you feel an almost irresistible urge to hug them and say, I've been there too. It's pure brain chemistry creating a bridge between two people. The internal structure of this process is a virtuous cycle. Vulnerability generates oxytocin, oxytocin generates trust, and trust generates more safety to be vulnerable. A self-feeding loop. But this cycle can be sabotaged by a glitch in our mental operating system, a very common cognitive bias. It's called the projection effect. It's a factory error in our brain that makes us believe others judge our vulnerabilities with the same harshness we judge our own. But science tells us it's just the opposite. Here's a strategy to counteract it. The next time you feel afraid to be vulnerable, do a mental exercise. Recall the last time someone was vulnerable with you. Did you see them as weak, or did you feel respect, empathy, and connection? Your answer will show you the truth. So, when you recognize that inner voice telling you, don't say it, they'll think you're foolish, actively remember that it's your brain making a mistake. The reality is people connect with humanity, not with perfection. Even our social customs reinforce this. Think of the ancient tradition of sitting around a fire telling stories. What were those stories if not an act of vulnerability? Sharing fears, failures, and triumphs was the glue that bound the tribe together. The takeaway for today is clear. Technology has given us screens to hide behind, but our biology still yearns for the warmth of that campfire. It still needs the connection that only shared vulnerability can create. And here we arrive at the key real-life takeaway, the most important action principle of this level. The general rule is this: vulnerability is an act of giving before receiving. It's an emotional investment whose return is trust. In practice, this means if you want more trust in your life, you can't just sit around waiting for it. You have to generate it. And the mechanism to do that is to dare to gradually and intelligently lower your guard. Understanding this is powerful. We stop seeing vulnerability as a risk to avoid and start seeing it as a tool to build. A tool that, like any other, must be learned how to use. But if you thought we had it all figured out, get ready, because here the story truly descends into chaos. Level 3, the chaos of reality. And here the debate begins. The first major controversy is vulnerability always a strength? On one hand, there are those who, inspired by researchers like Brené Brown from the University of Houston, argue that vulnerability is the birthplace of courage and innovation. On the other, critics say this idea is dangerous, that in toxic or competitive environments, being vulnerable is simply foolish. What's at stake is fundamental. For one side, it's about authenticity and connection. For the other, it's about self-preservation and safety. When do you show your cards, and when do you keep them close to your chest? And this leads us to challenge a very popular belief, the idea that sharing everything is being vulnerable. No, that's not vulnerability. The myth we need to debunk is that vulnerability is an unfiltered open diary. That has another name: emotional oversharing. True vulnerability is selective, has boundaries, and is shared with people who have earned the right to hear your story. We love to believe in the myth of sharing everything because it seems like an easy shortcut. It feels like if we just tell all, magical connection will appear. But real connection is built over time, not with a torrent of information. And here arises a fascinating paradox. To be vulnerable safely, you first have to be strong. You need to have enough self-esteem and clear boundaries to know that if the other person reacts poorly, you'll still be okay. This leaves us with an almost philosophical dilemma. How can you expose yourself to the risk of being hurt if you don't already have a foundation of internal security? It's a catch-22 that doesn't have an easy solution. Now let's take a critical viewpoint for a moment. Popular culture has turned vulnerability into a kind of trendy commodity, a badge of honor sometimes used to manipulate. And that's the ethical objection. Are we using vulnerability as a strategy to get something from others? Sharing a sad story to gain sympathy at work isn't courage, it's manipulation, and it's a very thin line. Another important controversy is the difference in how vulnerability is perceived in men and women. Historically, women were allowed to be emotionally vulnerable but not professionally, while men were expected to be impenetrable fortresses. Today, the debate has shifted. We're questioning these rules, but the confusion and old pressures are still very much present, creating a social minefield. All this chaos connects to something deep within the human condition, our desperate desire to be seen and accepted, and our equally desperate fear of rejection. The fundamental problem this creates for us as a species is how to balance that need for connection with the need for self-protection. It's the eternal dance between opening up and closing off. And nobody has the perfect instruction manual. As you see, reality isn't a simple slogan. It's a mess of contexts, intentions, and risks. It's complex, messy, and profoundly human. You've survived the chaos. Now it's time to look at the details that separate the curious from the true connoisseurs. Level 4, expert knowledge. Here's a concept you won't find in a quick search: vulnerability calibration. This is a more technical term used by social psychologists. It refers to the ability to adjust your level of vulnerability to the level of trust in a relationship. You don't start by confessing your deepest fear to a stranger. Imagine trust is like water in a pool. You don't dive head first if you don't know if it's full. First, you dip a toe to test the temperature. That's a small act of vulnerability. If the response is warm, maybe you wade in up to your knees. And so, little by little, until you can swim with confidence. And this brings us to a key but often overlooked figure in this field, preceding the topic's current fame, psychologist Sidney Girard. In the 60s and 70s, Girard was a secret hero. He was one of the first to scientifically investigate self-disclosure, which is the academic term for vulnerability. He demonstrated that psychological well-being is directly linked to our ability to be transparent with at least one other person. Now, for a rebellious theory, some evolutionary psychologists propose that vulnerability isn't just about creating bonds. It's also an honest signal of social status. The perspective is this: only an individual secure in their position within the group can afford the luxury of showing weakness. It's a way of saying, I'm so strong and have so many allies that I can afford to admit this mistake without it costing me anything. It's a demonstration of power, not weakness. And here's a counterintuitive neuroscience detail. Studies from Stanford University using brain scans show that when we decide to trust someone, the areas of the brain associated with rational and analytical thought quiet down a bit. This clashes with our intuition because we believe trust is a logical decision. But our brain tells us otherwise. Trusting is, in part, a leap of faith, a jump that requires quieting our inner analyst a bit. And the last niche detail that ties it all together, the concept of limbic resonance. And here's the aha moment. Limbic resonance is the idea that our nervous systems are attuned to each other. When you are genuinely vulnerable, the other person doesn't just understand it with their mind, they feel it in their body. Their brain literally mirrors your emotional state. That's why vulnerability is so contagious. This level of detail gives us a much more authentic view. Vulnerability isn't magic. It's an incredibly sophisticated biological, psychological, and social mechanism. And now you know its secrets. From here, we enter uncharted territory. Do you dare to look towards the final frontier? Level 5, the final frontier. And now let's speculate. A futuristic idea. What if in the future we develop synthetic empathy technologies that allow us to share our vulnerable states directly, brain to brain? In 100 years, perhaps the concept of being vulnerable will have completely changed. It could be that emotional privacy no longer exists as we know it, and the new skill will be navigating a world of radical transparency. And this brings us to the fundamental question where science hits a wall. Can we measure or quantify the trust that springs from vulnerability? We know it exists, we see its effects, but we can't put it into an equation. When science stops, philosophy takes over. Because the question then becomes, what is trust, really? Is it a calculation of risks, an emotion, or a fundamental property of consciousness? And the philosophical implication is dizzying. If real connection only springs from the risk of being hurt, does that mean suffering and potential pain are necessary conditions for a purposeful life? That without the possibility of darkness, there can be no light? This connects to the very future of humanity. In an increasingly polarized and distrustful world, the ability to be vulnerable first might not just be a personal skill. Mastering vulnerability on a global scale could be the key to solving problems like international conflicts or climate change, because all of them are based on a lack of trust, on nobody wanting to be the first to lower their guard. And here's the last idea, the most provocative of all. Perhaps vulnerability isn't something we do, but something we are. Perhaps it's the defining characteristic of consciousness. Think about it. To be conscious is to be open to the world, to be affected by it. To be a rock is not to be vulnerable. To be a living conscious being is by definition to be vulnerable. And with that idea, our descent through the 5 levels has concluded. Take a moment, breathe, and contemplate the incredible landscape we've journeyed through together. Remember how at the beginning we talked about that simple, familiar idea. Vulnerability is that fear of being hurt, as a weakness to be hidden. An idea born from an ancient survival instinct on the savannah. And now look at that idea in contrast with the latest we've discovered. That vulnerability could be the very essence of consciousness, the engine of global trust, and the signature of our very being. We've gone from seeing it as a simple, uncomfortable emotion to understanding it as a neurobiological mechanism, a complex social strategy, a philosophical dilemma, and perhaps a fundamental property of the universe. So now I ask you, which idea from this entire journey resonated most with you? Which one impacted you or made you see things in a completely new way? I truly want to thank you for dedicating your time and attention to exploring these ideas with me. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm fascinated to read how each mind connects with these topics in a unique way. If these kinds of deep dives are your thing, I invite you to subscribe so you don't miss the next one and to share this video with someone you think might appreciate it. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop being amazed. What if the greatest risk was never risking at all?